If it's your first time joining us today, I'm Lisa McGovern, and I'm the Executive Director of the Congressional Families Program. It was founded in 1991. It was a partnership between the Congressional Club and the that's my phone, the Congressional Club and at that time, Doris Matsui, now Congresswoman Matsui, was the head of the Congressional Club, and she said instead of, having us meet purely for social reasons, let's find something that we can all get behind to do that is bipartisan and not political, and they chose cancer prevention as the topic. And at that time they found the Prevent Cancer Foundation, which was a different name at that time, and we started by focusing on breast and prostate cancer, and then as more and more cancers have become preventable, the list is now expanded to 8 cancers and beyond. So up to 50% of cancer diagnoses are preventable, which is unbelievable to think that, people always thought that it was just sort of a random Russian roulette kind of thing, but actually up to 50% of cancer can be prevented. And a lot of it is awareness about what to do, behaviors, and so that's our role. What the Congressional Spouses, our role is to learn about techniques and strategies and take the information back to the communities and work within your communities. And social media has exploded. I mean, it's been a hot topic, obviously, in terms of politics. And I think most of us, when we had the orientation for the new spouses, I asked how many spouses were on social media, and I think almost everybody raised their hands. So in some form or another, we're all using social media, but I think many of us, myself included, use it largely just to connect to our own constituencies about, my daughter's going to college or my son is doing this or whatever. What our goal here today is to learn from Tammy, who I'm going to talk a little bit more about in a couple of seconds, but Tammy, to learn about how to harness these tools to reach out to our constituents to try to make an impact. And Congressional Families Program, actually, we hope to do a video campaign and include many of you called the Prevention Across America video campaign. Our hashtag will be We Prevent Cancer. And the idea is to do short videos, maybe 30 to 60 seconds, someplace within your district with a landmark or something that makes it obvious where you are, and talk about why cancer prevention is important to you. And then we'll share those, individually through our own geographic areas, but also do something composite, bipartisan, bicameral to make a national campaign out of it. So today we're thrilled to have Tammy Gordon here with us. Tammy's the founder of Verified Strategy, which is a digital strategy and marketing company where she trains leaders and executives about how to develop and cultivate and grow their own personal social brands. Prior to launching Verified Strategy, Tammy founded AARP's social media and studio divisions, and frankly, that's why we chose her, because we figured that, I figured personally, that if she had worked with my demographic to bring people up to speed on how to best utilize these tools, then that would be good for everybody. Under her leadership, the AARP won a Webby Award and had their first 3 million view videos, earned Twitter's DC's Best Real-Time Twitter campaign, and was cited in Facebook's Advertising Best Practices. Tammy is an alumni of the Ogilvy PR, Share Our Strength, which is a group that Jim and I work with very closely. So she comes through from good people, and has worked at some level on every presidential campaign cycle between President Clinton and Barack Obama. She also serves as a mentor at 1776, which the person, Cassie, who works with us here at Congressional Families, she used to be a member of that. They train startups. They help startup industries like education, energy, and sustainability and health that impact millions of people every lives every day. And Monique, who used to have this job, who was part of 1776, you'll be happy to know, went and started her own company out in California, so you did good work there too. So with that, I'm going to turn the program over to Tammy. She's going to go through the program, and then we have plenty of time for questions and answers. And then from here, this is kind of social media 1.0, but from here we'll be in touch about building this outreach, digging deeper into in a grassroots way into your own communities. So thank you, Tammy, for being here.
Thank you for having me. So I'm going to start going through this presentation, but we're a tight-knit group here. So if there are any things that come up on any of these slides that you have questions about, or I'm talking about some weird social media term that I think everybody knows, but everybody doesn't, there are no dumb questions in this room. And I think one of the things that I'd love to sort of establish at the front, and this is the AARP background in me, the opportunity for impact is huge, but there's also probably a lot of fear and uncertainty about how to use these different tools. And so I think, along the way, if there are things that are provocative or edgy, or you're just like anti whatever I'm talking about, I 100% do not mind having those conversations. So feel free to bring things up. Just a little about my background. Lisa kind of got into the mix, but I think, my biggest thing was I came from a traditional political campaign and public relations background. So it's not like I was some millennial. I mean, I'm 43. It's not like I'm some millennial that sort of grew up with Snapchat. When I left AARP, I didn't even know how to use Snapchat. I had to teach it to myself for new clients. And so I think anybody can learn these things. None of this is really all that techie. It's just communicating in new and different ways on different platforms. But, if you can write a paragraph or a sentence, you can do social media. So I don't think it should be like this mystical thing. And at AARP in particular, I feel really smart in hindsight, but back in 2007, it wasn't like people were driving at AARP to really get older people engaged in social media. That was really early. At the time, I was working in the media relations team, and I was really just researching my interns to make sure that they weren't irresponsible. So that was my gateway into social media. As I started thinking about a strategy for the organization, I realized one of the things was that grandkids were the gateway drug for social media for AARP members. And so they were getting online and getting on social to see the pictures of their grandkids. And that led to a huge opportunity for AARP to educate people, to teach them how to use it, to teach them safety and best practices. And then eventually down the road, and I think you see some of this play out, around this latest sort of healthcare round, engaging members on their personal social media in pushing back on issues and causes. And so that was really a long lead play back in 2008. Seems really smart in this kind of environment. But, I think it's one of those things where today you may not think of your Facebook account as something that you use for causes or advocacy or work, but it may be something that's a longer lead play when you do care about something that you want to get done. So why is it important? I talked a little bit about this. Cory Booker is kind of always like the case study I feel like that's held up. But I remember before he was even in Congress, he was tweeting about, shoveling snow as a mayor on the street. And essentially, what I would like you to take away from the arc of a Cory Booker is well before he was a senator, he was essentially thinking about himself like his own media outlet. He was essentially live tweeting and posting what he was doing on a daily basis, and he was growing followers. He was growing an audience, and that really propelled him to where he is today. But it's something where it can be as basic as what I'm having for lunch or a cute picture of my dog or my kids. But that may be the thing that brings a new follower on who then becomes a volunteer or an advocate or a spokesperson for you. So we'll talk a little bit about a diverse mix of content and what kinds of things to post, but that's a good case study to think through. The importance, why is it important? And is it important to you, I think is a big question. And so as you're sitting there evaluating your own personal and what you would use, these are some things that we sort of have as best practices for anybody in an advocacy or cause space. Building constituencies, extending your connections and network. I like to think of social media as almost this enormous cocktail party. And so in some situations, it's weird to walk up to somebody you don't know and start talking to them, and in some it's not. So we'll talk about different platforms. But I think like extending the people that you actually know in real life is a key component to growing your audience. Raising awareness for causes and issues that you care about. Huge opportunity there. Lisa and I have talked a lot about the cancer prevention and the causes and things that you could do around that, but really any causes that you care about or that you support. It's a great way to not only get the word out, potentially drive volunteers, donations, awareness, or get people involved that just have never even heard of it before. Humanizing yourself. I think this is something that people really struggle with. And I find it's both weird and something that comes as second nature now to me, to do things like post food pictures or pictures of my dog or what my view is or something like that. But once you start doing it, it's a little bit second nature. I chose this image because it's a member of Congress. So does anybody know whose picture this is from their social media account? So Debbie Wasserman Schultz has an entire Instagram that is just about cooking and food and clean eating. And so it's one of those things where it's not like she's sitting there with a congressional strategy in that account. It's just something that she's passionate about and that she cares about. But it's drawing new people and new followers that never would have probably followed her in the first place, either because they have different politics or because they're not from the same area or they just care about the same things when it comes to food. So it's interesting. I think a lot of people, I train on social media, so I think about these things this way, but normal human beings do not think about their lives and themselves as a content strategy. But essentially, that's what something like this is, where you're thinking about all of the different things that you care about and that you're interested in and how you would display them on your social media accounts. And then amplifying key issues, causes, and campaigns. I think and this is where the cocktail party analogy kind of comes back. If you every single day were walking up to somebody at a party and saying, hey, I want you to get involved in preventing cancer. Hey, I want you to involved in preventing cancer over and over, people would be like, that lady is weird and obnoxious and I don't want to be around her, back away slowly, right? So that's why it's so important to have a distributed presence and to really think about things that you're posting on social media. If your real goal is cause related, that you want to do a mix of cause and personal and professional, because it is that same thing. You're essentially walking up to the people who follow you and saying things over and over. Some benefits, right now we basically have full Congress on social media, particularly Facebook and Twitter. Some of them are experimenting with other platforms, and we'll go into the audiences for those just so you know what they are and you're more familiar. But essentially, and this became the play at AARP as well. When you start talking about who's on social media, it's essentially everybody when you're talking about Facebook. At this point, people that are not on Facebook are either just incapacitated or making some sort of technology stand that they refuse to. And that number is like 2% of the population at this point. So staffers this is just sort of like some reports and some, data that you can kind of take back and sort of think about how you want to, talk about different causes. But 75% of staffers are saying that social media has enabled more meaningful conversations with constituents. I think those of them that are on the front lines of social media will also tell you that it gets a lot of negative things. And I think we'll talk later in this presentation about how to handle negativity and when people reach out to you on social media, because that definitely, it will happen with anything and anyone. And then, we get into sort of Twitter and taking action, but one of the things that I think is really interesting about Twitter in particular, it may not be that your friends and family are on Twitter, but that's where the media, staffers, and voters are. And so that's something, if you really care about a cause and you want to get people activated on a cause, that's sort of the reason to use Twitter. People who use Twitter are much more likely to encourage their own audience, their own followers, to take an action like vote or a donation or a volunteer kind of thing. It's a much more of an activist network. So we're going to get into Twitter a little bit as well, but I sort of suspect that, raise your hand if you're on Facebook. Yeah. Raise your hand if you're on Twitter. Raise your hand if you're on Instagram. What about Snapchat? Oh, got a few in the back. All right. So we're going to talk about those different audiences and what makes sense there, but there may be some things that I'm talking about that you're just not experienced with yet. So definitely feel free to grill me if you're thinking about getting on. And I also just wouldn't. I know that you guys are in a space where you have a spotlight on you more than the average person, but I also wouldn't be necessarily afraid to try and learn things. I think you just want to do it in a sort of protected way.
I think Donald Trump has made all of us far more aware of Twitter.
I mean, yeah.
I think that engaged people that maybe were only on Facebook started to pay more attention just because there was so much going on.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, I'm seeing a lot more from a client standpoint, a lot more on that as well. You have a lot of people who traditionally haven't been using Twitter, especially at huge companies or CEOs, CMOs, things like that, that now are really thinking, what do I do if he starts calling out my issues or, the company that I work with? And if you're not watching it, if you're not listening and seeing what people are saying, then you're going to be caught flat-footed by something. And so, if you're a traditional sort of public relations person, it's a little bit, or campaign person, it's half op research, half constituent relations, half media clips, that kind of thing when it comes to Twitter. So just some basics. You guys are all on social, but I'm going to go through these just to kind of go through the basics because I think a lot of times people join and then don't necessarily follow the best practices of the setup. So deciding what platforms work for you and your goals. You do not have to be on everything and don't feel like you do. If you're choosing one thing to be a part of, it probably should be Facebook. But if you have specific causes that you're working on, you really may want to think about what other places do I want to be. And these are just sort of some general breakdowns, but depending on your cause, your issue, and what area you're trying to impact, these numbers then can fluctuate based on region, issue area, target audience, things like that. But generally on Facebook, like I said, it's essentially everyone, but it's, 82% of people 18 to 29, 79% of 30 to 49, and even in the 65 plus age range, 56% of the audience is on there. And these numbers are 2 years old, so they're even much more outdated. Question?
Have you found that younger people are pulling off Facebook?
So the best analogy that I've heard for this is not that they're pulling off of Facebook. I think they're spending less time on Facebook. So one way that I've heard that that really just resonated with me is, especially for the younger generation, Facebook is much more like the phone book. It's how you keep in touch with people that you meet over the years. It's so you always have, when you look at Facebook now, there are these circles at the top. This is essentially what they're doing. They've mimicked that because it's a popular feature with younger users, and they've now put that into Facebook. So I don't know that I'll end up using it all that often, but it's definitely sort of the hot topic in social media in the past 24 hours as Facebook has added stories and the ability to do those video chats within their platform. Essentially what's happening there is business and vying for ads. Snapchat is surging, especially with television programs. You'll see the Wall Street Journal and CNN all have dedicated journalists, storytellers who are producing news content for Snapchat. So there are all kinds of things. I talk to media relations teams a lot where we're trying to upgrade the types of media relations strategies they do. And I can't tell you, I haven't talked to one media relations person that is reaching out to those teams and thinking about how would I tell the story via Snapchat rather than writing a press release. But I think that's probably where communications is headed is what's that visual storytelling look like and how do you deliver it on different platforms? Snapchat has done a lot of work with brands and a lot of work with media outlets. And for that reason, it is getting a lot of ad dollars from those brands. And so that's why you see Facebook trying to compete with it. But again, it's very much younger, much younger, almost all under 25, 70% female. It started out very much as like a selfie sharing tool, and you can put filters on it that make you like prettier, or like wear a like cute hat, or that are cause related and things like that. So people every day sort of wake up and see, what filters can I put on my face and what can I send to my friends, and it's like kind of fun and kind of goofy and kind of like much more playful than other networks, because the whole premise of Snapchat was everything disappears in 24 hours. So I think you just like, people think less about, is this important to post? And they're just like, who cares? I'm just having fun. And I think that's probably why it grew with younger audiences, right? Like, when you're 13, you don't overthink, like, does anyone care what I'm having for lunch? You just like snap the picture and send it to your friends. So getting started, creating an effective profile, no matter what platform you're on, you're wanting to have a profile that's both professional and shows a little bit of your personality. I'm just going to show a few different ones from Congress, but I think the things that you'll see there underneath the picture and the handle is a little bio, and it only gives you 140 characters. And so you really have to sort of choose what you want to put there. I think the ones that are most interesting are when people are playful. So like, hold on, I'm gonna get this right. So Ted says, husband of Betty, love of my life, father of 2 great kids, U.S. Air Force veteran, member of Congress, in that order. Also, I don't take orders from Vladimir Putin. So you don't have to be so serious with the way that you portray yourself. And I think that's something that, I don't know about you guys, but that's something I certainly struggle with, is what's the right balance between playfulness and professionalism. And I think it really kind of depends on the person. Profile tips. Avatars in particular, that's the square box where on all of these social networks it sort of shows your face or whatever you put there. I find that women a lot of times, I'm gonna put ourselves out there. Women a lot of times have a very sort of like casual picture that we snap of, ourselves or at a party or something, and we crop our friends out of, and we sort of look like we're out, I don't know, on some kind of like fashion shoot. And I feel like the men tend to have these very professional shots done. So maybe less so in a congressional audience, but I think one of the things that I talk a lot to my women friends in media and technology about the importance of really thinking through a headshot. If you're going to put pictures up there and you're using it as just something with your friends, you think about it in a different way. But if you're going to put yourself out there with a cause, that's something that anybody could pull that picture from. Like, you really want to have something that showcases yourself in a professional way and makes you like look and feel your best. So I feel like that's something that people don't talk enough about when they're setting up their profiles, is what do I want that picture to look and show. And then to the same extent, I see all the time people have their avatar picture here and then leave this blank because it's something new that happened on Facebook and they don't want to deal with it, and what do you even put there, and all of these kinds of things. So a cover photo, and this is almost on every social network now, is basically just a big backdrop that highlights the head of your page. You can put whatever you want there. If you're struggling with coming up with something to put there, either a landscape of some place that you love, or a recent picture, a friend. It's kind of that long photo there. But if you're trying to get out there on a cause in particular, I will tell you a little secret tip of like people who work in social media. If you don't have a cover photo there, Facebook and Twitter in particular take that as you don't know what you're doing kind of thing. And if it's not filled out, they actually put you further down in news feeds, because it's essentially a sign that this is not a top tier account. And so when they do their algorithm that essentially puts things higher in the news feed to different people, if everything's not filled out, and that's why it's like important to have a great bio and photo and cover photo. Part of it is like it's you branding yourself, but part of it is you're working an algorithm behind the scenes. And if you don't have all of those sort of boxes checked, the platform will essentially say this is not an active user. Any questions on that? And then controlling your privacy and confidentiality. I feel like this is going to be like a big thing with this group, and it should. First of all, privacy changes all the time. And so I feel like there could be a cottage industry just like keeping people up to date on privacy changes. But my general rules of thumb are, especially because you have a public presence, you never want anybody to know where you are at any given time in case they would like show up there. So on Facebook, on Twitter, on almost all of these different platforms, there'll be like what's called a geotag, but it's almost that check-in feature where it's saying like, I'm at this restaurant or I'm at this thing. My rule of thumb is I never check in until I'm leaving or I'm gone, because I don't want, and this has happened to me, I do not want somebody to walk up to me at a random restaurant and say, hi, I'm so-and-so, I follow you on Twitter. It's super awkward, but it's even more of a security thing with what you guys are doing. So don't check into places unless you are walking out the door or you're leaving or those kinds of things. That doesn't say that you can't ever check in, but I just like make sure that I don't do it really until I'm gone. Passwords, this is something that we all know, but we're all not great at because it's hard to remember your passwords, right? But passwords should be something that's difficult to figure out. Ideally, they should change. I know that I'm like preaching that and I don't always do that. But there was more and more they're adding different like capitalizations or add a character to it or things like that. So I think that's one of the biggest barriers to people really participating in all of these things sometimes is like, I don't even remember what all these passwords are, right? So if you are like that and you just want an easy button to have secure passwords, but not have to like remember them all, there's a free service called Dashlane, and I can like add this to the DASHLANE, and it's just a free download, and it'll generate random passwords that are completely random, so you'll never remember what they are like without looking at it, but you essentially could cut and paste those into your thing, and whenever you want to update them, they just generate a new password, but it'll always save it in the Dashlane app, so you can always go back to find it.
Can you pause on that for
Yeah,
a second?
absolutely.
So is that a place where it stores multiple passwords for you?
Yes.
I mean, like, so is it like a directory for you?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
You can either put in your own passwords or you can let it generate ones for you that are arbitrary that you can use across all of your accounts. You can say, I need a new password, and, generate an automated one, and it'll come up with, I'm making this up, but like, IA3Q exclamation point, blah, 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 something you would never come up with. But it'll save that in the app so you remember it when you do have to log back in.
But within the app, would I be able to say, okay, my Amazon password is X,
Yeah.
my work app is X, my Facebook is X, and
Yes.
it stores all of those for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a basic version, I believe, that's free that does all of that for you as an individual. And then, for instance, I started using Dashlane because when I was working at ARP, this is not a best practice, I was trying to get everybody on social media really early on. I did a million different trainings, and like I really trained like all of the state staff and all the leadership and every campaign, and 8 years down the road, we ended up with like over 500 social media accounts. And so as an organization, somebody has to know all the passwords and manage all that for your accounts. We used an enterprise version of it, which was a paid service, but for individuals, it's free. But if you think about that, like if you do have somebody who's like a staffer or somebody who kind of co-manages your accounts, that can be something where you guys share passwords and password updates and changes within a private, veiled space.
And to get into that app, you have your own password in it.
Yeah.
So really all you have to remember
Is one, right? Yeah. I think it's like really funny too. I'm terrible about having basically the same password across all my accounts because it makes me remember it. And so even when I update and change the password, it's always like the same. And whenever I have like interns who I'm letting into something, they're just like, you use the same password for all of your stuff. I'm like, is that bad? Yes, it's bad. I know. Sorry, but. I think like everybody, like you're busy. You're not going to remember 15 different passwords, especially if they're randomly generated. So Dashlane is just a tool that I recommend that kind of manages them for you. So editing and cleaning up. So a lot of us started doing social media without thinking about what we would be doing today with social media, right? And so I think you see this. So you talked about Donald Trump, and one of the things that I think we're seeing a lot right now is things that people said on social media coming back to bite them years down the road. So one of the things, this is not necessarily a best practice in general, but I would say for people who are dealing with the public at the level that you are, there may be things that you just want to like go in and clean up. In general, like if you're a brand, like when I'm at ARP, it's seen as like bad for a brand to go in and like delete tweets, you know, things like that. Because it's sort of like you're changing the public record in some way. But I don't think it is strange or weird or like bad for you to go back and be like, oh, you know, I posted that and like I was just like talking to a friend of mine, but like now I see a problem with that. Like deleting a post here and there is like not that, you know, weird for like an individual. And then like when it comes to like the cleanup, just like I talked to candidates a lot about this. So like if you're thinking about running for office, it's a very different prospect to look at your social media than it is as just like a citizen. So all of a sudden you're looking at it going, like, do I really want all of these pictures out drinking with my friends on it, or, you know, different things? And sometimes yes, because it's like you're a human and you want it to be like normal, but I think just giving it a sort of eye to like, are there things I need to go through and clean up within my accounts or not? And some of that may just be doing the basic things like writing your bio, having an avatar picture, having a cover photo, some basics like that. But getting started, definitely like take a pass at like, are there things you want to clean up on it?